Give me the 85,000. But son, I can't. Not right now.
Look at these papers, Ma. I need you to sign this now.
No.
Time to face this. Just be careful, Mom. 13 years. All this time. Oh my God.
My son came to my house on a Sunday evening carrying divorce papers and expecting me to write him an $85,000 check. Claire destroyed our marriage, Ryan said, dropping the folder onto my kitchen table. After everything I've done for this family, Mom, you owe me this. That word "owe" stayed with me. I didn't argue. I didn't reach for my checkbook. Instead, I walked into my late husband's study, opened a filing cabinet I hadn't touched in months, and pulled out a blue box David had once insisted I keep. Inside were 13 years of receipts. My son wanted me to pay for his divorce. Before I gave him $1, I decided to find out exactly how much I had already paid for his marriage. If you were sitting at that kitchen table with me, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about family boundaries and the choices that change us mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe. I'd be grateful to have you here for what happened next. 13 years earlier, I had believed Ryan's wedding was the beginning of the happiest chapter of his life. Looking back, I realize it was also the beginning of a pattern I refused to recognize. Ryan had always been the kind of person who could make a problem sound temporary. When he was 16 and wrecked his first car, it was bad luck. When he changed college majors twice, he was finding the right direction. When he graduated with more credit card debt than David and I knew about, he promised he only needed 6 months to get ahead. And somehow 6 months always became another 6 months. Still, he was my only son, and I loved him. When he introduced us to Claire, I thought perhaps she would be the steady influence he needed. She was 26 then, with dark brown hair she usually wore, pulled back, and a quiet way of listening that made you feel as if your words mattered. She worked as a program assistant for a nonprofit in Richmond and lived within her means. Her car was 7 years old, her apartment was small, and she carried a little notebook where she wrote down every expense. The first Christmas she spent with us, she brought me a homemade apple pie and apologized because the crust had cracked. David took one bite and said, "If this is what you call a failure, you're going to fit into this family just fine." Claire laughed. Ryan rolled his eyes. For a while, everything felt easy. When they announced their engagement, David and I offered them $10,000 toward the wedding. We thought it was generous. Apparently, weddings had become much more expensive since ours. The venue Ryan loved required a large deposit. Then there was catering, photography, flowers, the band, and a rehearsal dinner Ryan insisted needed to be memorable. One evening he came over carrying a spreadsheet. "We're only about 8,000 short," he said. David looked over his reading glasses. Only Ryan smiled. "You know what I mean." I remember Claire sitting beside him looking uncomfortable. "We can cut things," she said quickly. "We don't need the band. We can use a DJ, and I can simplify the flowers." Ryan reached over and squeezed her hand. "You only get married once." That sentence stayed with me for years for reasons none of us could have imagined then. I looked at David. He looked at me. We had the money. Our mortgage was almost paid off. We had retirement accounts, and I was still working as a financial manager for a construction company. David's engineering consulting business was doing well, so we increased our contribution. $10,000 became $18,000. I wrote the check. 3 days later, Claire appeared at our house carrying a card. Inside, she had written 2 full pages thanking us. She said she understood how hard David and I had worked for what we had, and promised she would never take our generosity for granted. I still have that card. Ryan thanked us too, of course, but his gratitude sounded different. "Someday I'll pay you both back," he said. David smiled. "We're not asking you to pay us back. I know, but I will." The wedding was beautiful. I can still see Claire walking toward Ryan under strings of white lights, and I remember thinking my son looked happier than I had ever seen him. I cried during their vows. David pretended he had something in his eye. Afterward, Ryan hugged us both. Best night of my life, he said. I believed him. A week later, the first unexpected expense arrived. Ryan called from the airport. Their honeymoon hotel had placed a larger hold on their card than expected, and their available credit wasn't enough for the rental car and incidentals. Mom, it's embarrassing, he said. Can you just put it on your card? I'll reimburse you when we get back. It was $300. I paid it. When they returned, I never asked for the money. 2 months later, their apartment lease ended. They wanted a larger place but needed the security deposit and first month's rent immediately. Another $600. We're just stretched because of the wedding, Ryan explained. Again temporary. Again understandable. Again I helped. Claire called me afterward. You didn't have to do that. I know. We'll pay you back. I laughed. Just build a good life together. At the time, those words felt loving. Years later, I would understand how dangerous they could become when repeated without limits. One Saturday morning, I found David sitting at the kitchen table with a folder. What are you doing? I asked. Keeping records. He showed me copies of the wedding check, the honeymoon charge, and the apartment deposit. I laughed. Are you planning to audit our son? No. He closed the folder. Then why keep all that? Because money changes people's memories. I remember staring at him. That sounded unusually cynical for David. He had always been generous. He was the man who slipped $20 bills into birthday cards and refused repayment when neighbors borrowed tools and broke them. Ryan knows what we've done for him, I said. I'm sure he does today. David. He sighed. I'm not accusing him of anything, Paige. Then what are you worried about? He was quiet for several seconds. Finally he said, patterns. I didn't like that word. It made our generosity sound like evidence. He just got married, I said. Young couples struggle, I know, and we can afford to help. I know that too. Then what's the problem? David reached across the table and took my hand. The problem isn't helping. His voice softened. The problem is making help so predictable that somebody starts building their life around receiving it. I pulled my hand away, not angrily but defensively. He's our son. Exactly. David placed the receipts back inside the folder. That's why we need to know the difference between helping him stand and teaching him that we'll always catch him. I thought he was overreacting. For the next several years, I would tease him whenever he saved another receipt. Adding to the Ryan archives. He would smile, just keeping history accurate. The folder eventually became too thick, so David transferred everything into a blue document box in his study. I barely noticed. There were receipts for little things and large things. A refrigerator Ryan and Claire couldn't afford when theirs died. A car repair. A medical deductible. Plane tickets for a family emergency. Some were gifts. Some Ryan promised to repay. Some I honestly couldn't remember discussing at all. But one thing remained strangely consistent. Whenever Claire received help directly, she thanked us. Sometimes with a phone call, sometimes with a handwritten note, sometimes with banana bread left on our porch. Ryan usually thanked us too, but he almost always added the same sentence. I'll make it up to you someday. And I believed him, not because I expected the money back, but because I thought the sentence meant he understood what had been given. There is a difference between remembering a gift and believing you were entitled to receive it. I didn't understand that difference yet. The first time I truly noticed something changing was at their third anniversary dinner. Ryan had just received a promotion. He was talking excitedly about buying a house. Claire said they needed another year to save. Ryan laughed. We'll figure it out. Claire looked at him. With what money? Ryan glanced toward me. It lasted no more than a second. But David saw it too. On the drive home, he was unusually quiet. What I finally asked. You saw that. Saw what the look. I knew exactly what he meant. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I stared through the windshield at the dark Virginia highway. He's ambitious. That isn't a crime. No. David kept his eyes on the road. But ambition becomes dangerous when somebody else is expected to finance it. That night he went into his study. I heard the filing cabinet open. When he returned, I asked what he had been doing. Updating the box. I shook my head. You really think those receipts are going to matter someday? David looked at me for a long moment. I hope they never do. 13 years later, standing alone in that same study after my son demanded $85,000 for his divorce, I would remember those exact words. And I would finally understand why David had kept every single one. The house Ryan wanted was a red brick colonial in a quiet neighborhood outside Richmond with 4 bedrooms, a fenced backyard, and a maple tree shading the front porch. Claire thought it was too expensive. Ryan thought it was perfect. I remember standing in the kitchen during their second showing, while Claire studied the listing sheet, as if the numbers might become smaller if she stared long enough. "We don't need 4 bedrooms," she said. "Not yet," Ryan replied. Claire looked at him. "What does that mean?" He smiled and put his arm around her. "It means I'm planning ahead." 3 weeks later, they learned Claire was pregnant. Suddenly, the house became more than a house in Ryan's mind. It became proof that he was building the life he believed he should have. There was only one problem. They were short on the down payment, by $35,000. Ryan called me on a Tuesday evening. "Mom, this is different." I almost laughed because every request somehow began that way. "How this isn't paying off a credit card or fixing a car. It's an investment. It's a house. It'll appreciate." David was sitting beside me and could hear enough of the conversation to understand. Ryan continued, "If we lose this house, we'll be stuck renting another year. With the baby coming, that makes no sense. Does Claire know you're calling?" There was a pause. "Of course." That answer bothered me. Not because I thought Ryan was lying exactly, but because he answered too quickly. David held out his hand for the phone. "Tell him we'll discuss it and call tomorrow." I did. That night, David and I sat at the kitchen table. "We can afford $35,000, I said. "That isn't the question. What is whether we should?" I felt myself becoming defensive. "They're having our first grandchild. And I want them somewhere stable." "They have a perfectly stable apartment." I frowned. "You know what I mean." David leaned back. "I do. Paige, I'm not against helping them. But I want this documented. You want our son to sign a loan agreement. If it's a loan, yes. And if it's a gift, then we document that too." I sighed. "You make family sound like a business transaction." "No. I spent 35 years watching families turn money into arguments because nobody wrote down what anyone meant." The next evening, Ryan and Claire came over. Claire looked exhausted. Morning sickness had been rough and she was still working full-time. David explained our offer. We would provide the $35,000. But we needed to decide whether it was a gift or a loan. Before Ryan could answer, Claire said, "A loan." Ryan turned toward her. "Claire, it's too much money to be a gift. We've talked about this." "No, you talked about it." The room became quiet. Claire looked at me. "If you help us, I want something in writing. We can repay it monthly once I'm back at work." I appreciated that. But Ryan looked embarrassed. "Seriously. We're going to sign paperwork with my parents. It protects everyone," Claire said. "From what misunderstandings?" Ryan laughed without humor. "They're my parents." David spoke calmly. "That doesn't make misunderstandings impossible." Ryan's jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw something I didn't want to see. Not anger exactly. Entitlement. Then I did what I had done too many times. I softened the situation. "It can be a gift." David looked at me. "Paige, we're comfortable. They need it. Sophie will need a home." We had already chosen the baby's name in our hearts even though she had not yet been born. Claire shook her head. "I don't feel right about that." Ryan reached for her hand. "Mom wants to do it." That sentence settled the argument. Or perhaps I allowed it to. We transferred $35,000. 2 months later, Ryan and Claire moved into the red brick house. I helped unpack the kitchen while David assembled a crib upstairs. That afternoon, Claire hugged me. "We couldn't have done this without you. You'll do the same for Sophie someday." Claire smiled. "I hope so." Ryan walked through carrying a box. "See, best investment we ever made." David glanced at him. "We?" Ryan laughed. "You know what I mean." David said nothing. But later, when we returned home, I watched him put another document into the blue box. The next year was full of the ordinary chaos of a new baby. Sophie arrived in March, 6 pounds 11 ounces, with a furious cry on Ryan's chin. I fell in love instantly. There were complications with Claire's delivery. Nothing life-threatening, thankfully, but enough to create hospital bills their insurance didn't fully cover. We paid $4,800. Then their washing machine broke. Then Ryan's car needed a transmission repair. Then the nursery developed water damage after a pipe leaked inside the wall. Each expense had a reasonable explanation. That was what made the pattern so difficult to recognize. There was never one outrageous request, just a series of understandable emergencies. One evening I found David at his desk with a legal pad. He had drawn columns: date, amount, purpose, gift or loan, repayment promised, repayment received. I stood behind him. "You really are auditing them?" "No." He tapped the page. "I'm remembering accurately. The total was already higher than I expected." I stared at it. "That can't be right." "It is." I began mentally subtracting things. The hospital bill shouldn't count. Why? Because that was Sophie. Money is money, Paige. The crib was a gift. I marked it as a gift. The house money was a gift too. I marked that. I pointed toward the final column. Then why track repayment? Because Ryan called some things loans. I looked closer. There were 5 separate entries Ryan had promised to repay. Only one showed a payment. $200. I felt uncomfortable. He has a baby. I know. He'll catch up. Maybe. You sound like you don't trust him. David put down his pen. I trust Ryan to be Ryan. What is that supposed to mean? He turned toward me. It means our son is charming, ambitious, optimistic, and very good at believing tomorrow's success will solve today's obligations. I crossed my arms. That sounds harsh. It isn't meant to be. Then why keep score? David was quiet. Finally he said, "Ed, because someday he may forget there was a score at all." That irritated me. But 3 weeks later something happened that made me understand what David meant. We were having Sunday dinner at Ryan's house. Claire mentioned that they needed to delay replacing the backyard fence. Ryan shrugged. "We'll handle it." With what Claire asked. "My bonus." "You said your bonus was going toward the car loan." Ryan smiled. "We'll figure it out." Claire looked frustrated. "We can't keep figuring things out after we spend money." Ryan laughed and nodded toward me. "Relax, we have a safety net." I froze. Claire's face changed immediately. "Ryan, what your parents are not our safety net." I was joking. But David didn't laugh. Neither did I. On the drive home, he said nothing for almost 10 minutes. Then he spoke quietly. "That's what I was afraid of." I looked out the passenger window. He said he was joking. No, Paige. He said the truth and called it a joke when nobody laughed. I wanted to argue. Instead, I remembered Ryan glancing toward me when they had first discussed buying the house. That same confidence, that same assumption. For the first time, I wondered whether our help had stopped feeling like generosity to him. Maybe it had started feeling like infrastructure, something permanent, something he could build plans on. That night, David returned to his legal pad. I stood in the doorway watching him. "Keep it," I said. He looked up. "The list." I swallowed. "Keep everything." He nodded once. Then he placed the updated sheet inside the blue box. Years later, after David was gone, and Ryan stood in my kitchen expecting me to finance the end of his marriage, that handwritten sheet would become one of the first things I found. At the bottom beneath the total, David had written one sentence I had never seen before. "Helping him stand is love. Paying every time he refuses to stand may become something else." David died on a cold January morning 6 years before Ryan came to me asking for divorce money. There are losses that divide your life into 2 versions of yourself: the woman you were before, and the woman who has to figure out how to keep living afterward. For almost 40 years, David had been the person who questioned me without making me feel small. When I wanted to rush into something, he slowed me down. When I worried too much, he reminded me that not every problem required immediate action. And when it came to Ryan, David had been the boundary I never realized I depended on. After his funeral, that boundary disappeared. Ryan was wonderful during those first months. I want to be fair about that. He came by every weekend. He changed the furnace filter, carried boxes to the attic, handled paperwork I didn't have the strength to look at. Claire brought meals. Sophie, then 7, left drawings on my refrigerator. For a while I felt surrounded by family. Then the requests began again. The first was the roof. A storm damaged part of Ryan and Claire's house, and their insurance deductible was higher than they expected. Just until the claim is settled, Ryan said. I gave him $6,000. He never repaid it. I never asked. Then Sophie was accepted into a private school Ryan desperately wanted her to attend. Claire thought they should wait. Ryan called me. It's not about status, Mom. She'll have opportunities there she won't get anywhere else. How much? There was a pause. Tuition's around $12,000 for the year, but we only need help with the first semester. I paid $6,200 directly to the school. Claire called that evening. You shouldn't have done that. I wanted to. I know, but Ryan and I need to make decisions based on what we can afford. Her words bothered me because they sounded so much like David. She's my granddaughter. I know. And education matters. It does. Claire hesitated. That isn't what I mean. I understood, but I didn't want to. So I changed the subject. The next request came 8 months later. Ryan had invested in a small medical distribution startup with 2 colleagues. He described it as an opportunity too good to ignore. I told him I didn't understand the business. You don't have to, he said. I do. He wanted $20,000. That time I refused. Not because I had suddenly developed stronger boundaries, but because I remembered David. If it's such a good investment, I said, take the proposal to a bank. Ryan laughed. Banks don't understand early-stage opportunities. Then perhaps that should tell you something. He went quiet. For 3 days he barely spoke to me. Then he called as though nothing had happened. I later learned he had found the money elsewhere. The investment failed within a year. I thought that would teach him caution. Instead, it created another emergency. Ryan arrived at my house one Thursday afternoon carrying an envelope. He looked terrible. Mom, I need your help. I immediately thought someone was sick. What happened? He handed me the envelope. Inside were credit card statements, 4 cards. The balances totaled $14,700. I stared at him. What is this I got behind? $14,000 behind. It wasn't all spending. What does that mean? Some of it was from the investment. Some was household stuff. Does Claire know? That was when he stopped looking at me. Ryan, she knows we have debt. That isn't what I asked. He sat down. No. The word frightened me more than the amount. You're hiding $14,700 from your wife. I'm not hiding it. What would you call it? Managing it. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, tell Claire. His head snapped up. Mom, if you want my help, tell your wife. You don't understand, then explain it. She'll panic. She has a right to know. She worries about everything. That doesn't make the debt disappear. He stood and paced across my living room. This is exactly why I didn't want to tell you. You came here, because I thought you'd understand. I looked at him. What do you want from me? If I can pay these cards off now, I can reset everything. There it was again. Reset. Fresh start. Temporary problem. Tomorrow would fix today. How much can you repay monthly? He looked surprised. To you, yes. I thought... He stopped. You thought what his expression told me. He had expected me to pay it, not lend it. Pay it. I should have refused. Instead, grief made me weak in places I didn't understand. Helping Ryan made me feel useful. And being useful temporarily filled the enormous empty space David had left. So I paid the $14,700. But this time I did something different. I saved Ryan's email. He had sent it the night before I transferred the money. Mom, thank you for keeping this between us. Claire doesn't know the full amount, and I need time to fix it before she does. Once the cards are cleared, I can handle everything from there. I promise this is the last time. Ryan, I printed it. Then I walked into David's study. The room still smelled faintly of his aftershave and old books. For months I had avoided the filing cabinet. That afternoon I opened it. The blue box was exactly where David had left it. Inside were years of receipts, bank records, notes, and that handwritten ledger. I added the credit card statements. Then I added Ryan's email. I remember whispering you were right. But even then, I wasn't ready to change. A month later, Claire came over for coffee. She looked tired. Is Ryan okay? She asked. My heart started pounding. Why? He's been strange about money. I stared into my cup. He always worries about money. No, this is different. I said nothing. Claire continued. I asked if something happened with the investment. He said everything was handled. I should have told her. Instead, I protected my son. If Ryan says it's handled, maybe trust him. The words tasted wrong. Claire nodded slowly. I suppose. That conversation haunted me later. Because I had not merely paid Ryan's secret debt, I had helped him keep the secret. And once you start protecting someone from the consequences of dishonesty, it becomes difficult to know where helping ends and participating begins. Over the next few years, Ryan continued presenting himself as successful. He drove a newer SUV. He took Sophie to Disney World. He renovated the kitchen. At family dinners, he talked about investments and promotions. Whenever I asked how finances were going, he smiled. Great. But sometimes Claire would make a small comment. We're trying to cut expenses. Or I wish Ryan would stop treating bonuses like guaranteed income. Each time I felt that old discomfort. I never told her about the $14,700. Ryan never repaid me. And he never mentioned his promise that it had been the last time. Then one evening years later, while sorting through the blue box after Ryan demanded $85,000 for his divorce, I found that printed email again. I read the sentence slowly. Claire doesn't know the full amount. For years, Ryan had told me Claire was overly anxious about money. Now he was telling me she had destroyed their marriage by taking money from him. And suddenly I found myself asking a question I should have asked much earlier. How many financial secrets had my son kept from his wife? I looked at the divorce papers on my desk, then at the old credit card statements. For the first time, I stopped assuming Ryan was the person in his marriage who needed protecting. Ryan came back to my house 2 days after he first asked me for the $85,000. This time he arrived without the divorce papers. He brought coffee. That was how Ryan operated when he wanted something badly. The first conversation carried urgency. The second carried charm. I got your usual, he said, placing a paper cup beside me. Thank you. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. For several seconds, neither of us mentioned the money. Then Ryan sighed. I'm sorry about Sunday. For what? Coming in hot? I almost smiled at the phrase. You were upset. I still am. He rubbed both hands over his face. I haven't slept properly in weeks. I wanted to reach across the table and touch him. That instinct never disappeared. No matter how old your child becomes, there is some part of you that remembers the feverish little boy who climbed into your bed during thunderstorms. But I remembered the email in the blue box. Claire doesn't know the full amount. So I kept my hands around my coffee. Tell me exactly what happened. Ryan looked surprised. I already did. You told me Claire wanted a divorce. She does. You told me she took money. His expression hardened. $42,000. From where? Our joint account. When? About 3 weeks ago. And why? Ryan laughed bitterly. Because she's planning her exit. Did she tell you that? What other reason would there be? I watched him carefully. She may have had one. Mom, I'm asking. Ryan leaned back. She transferred 42 grand into an account I can't access. If I did that to her, everyone would call it financial abuse. The phrase sounded rehearsed. Was the money entirely yours? It was marital money. That isn't what I asked. He stared at me. Why are you interrogating me? I'm trying to understand before I give you $85,000. His jaw tightened. I thought you trusted me. There it was. The sentence that had ended so many uncomfortable conversations in our family. Trust me. It had worked on Claire. It had worked on me. Perhaps it had even worked on David for a while. I do trust you, I said carefully. But trust doesn't mean I stop asking questions. Ryan looked toward the window. I can't believe she's doing this. Did something happen between you? We've been struggling. For how long a while? What does that mean? Maybe 2 years. That shocked me. 2 years. We didn't want to involve everyone. I thought about Christmas dinners, birthdays, Sophie's school events, photographs of Ryan and Claire smiling beside each other. You seemed fine. That was the point. He sounded almost proud of it. Then he began telling me his version of their marriage. According to Ryan, Claire had become distant. She questioned every purchase. She criticized his investments. She no longer supported his career ambitions. She had started talking about separate finances. And then 3 weeks earlier, she moved the $42,000. She's been planning this, he said. I guarantee it. I felt myself slipping towards sympathy again. Then my phone rang. Claire. I stared at her name. Ryan saw it. Don't answer. I looked up. Why? Because she's trying to get to you first. She's your wife, not for much longer. The phone stopped ringing. A few seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. Ryan stood. I have to get back to work. He kissed my cheek. Please, Mom. I need an answer by Friday. After he left, I waited nearly an hour before listening to Claire's message. Her voice sounded controlled. Paige, I know Ryan has spoken to you. I'm not calling to ask you to choose sides. I would never do that. But there's something you need to know before you make any financial decisions. Please call me when you're ready. I listened twice. Then I called. Claire answered immediately. Thank you. What's going on? She exhaled. I'm guessing Ryan asked you for money. I didn't answer. I'm not asking how much, she continued. That's between you and him. He said you took $42,000. Silence. Then Claire said I moved it. So that part is true, yes. Why? Because if I hadn't, it would be gone. I sat straighter. What do you mean Ryan was draining the account? He said it was your joint savings. It was what remained. What remained from what? Claire became quiet again. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower. Paige, before you give Ryan anything, ask him what happened to the home equity money. I frowned. What home equity money? Silence. This one lasted long enough to frighten me. He didn't tell you. Tell me what. Claire took a breath. Ryan borrowed against the house. How much? I don't know the exact total anymore because there were 2 refinances and then a home equity line. My fingers tightened around the phone. The house we helped you buy? Yes. Why? The first refinance was supposed to consolidate debt and lower our interest rate. At least that's what he told me. And the second, I didn't understand everything at the time. Claire. I trusted him. There was no accusation in her voice. That somehow made it worse. What about the equity line? I found out about that later. How much? Paige, I think you need to ask Ryan. I'm asking you. She hesitated. Almost $100,000 was accessible at one point. I stood so quickly my chair scraped the floor. 100,000. Not all at once. What did he do with it? I'm still trying to figure that out. My heart pounded. Was the 42,000 part of that? Some of it was money I moved after I realized he was transferring funds again. Transferring them where? Investments. Business accounts. I don't know all of it. I closed my eyes. The failed startup. The credit cards. The $14,700. The email. Claire doesn't know the full amount. Why didn't you tell me? Claire's voice cracked slightly. Because he's your son. That isn't an answer. Yes, it is. I said nothing. He told me you'd already been through enough after David died. And I was embarrassed. Embarrassed? I'm 39 years old, Paige. I have a job. I have a child. I should have known what was happening in my own marriage. I heard something in her voice I recognized. Shame. Not guilt. Shame. The same shame I had felt realizing how often I had rescued Ryan. Are you asking me not to give him the money? No. Her answer surprised me. I'm asking you to know what you're paying for. That sentence landed harder than any accusation could have. After we ended the call, I sat alone at the kitchen table. Ryan's coffee cup was still there. I looked at the chair where he had been sitting less than an hour earlier, telling me Claire had stolen $42,000. Maybe she had moved it. but stealing and protecting were not necessarily the same thing. I walked into David's study. The blue box was open on the desk. I pulled out the receipt from the $35,000 down payment we had given Ryan and Claire years earlier. I remembered the red brick house, the nursery, the maple tree, David assembling Sophie's crib upstairs. Then I remembered something else. Ryan saying the house was an investment. I took out my phone. For one terrible second, I wanted to call him immediately. I wanted to demand answers. But I heard David's voice in my memory. Money changes people's memories. So instead of calling Ryan, I called Margaret Sloan, the attorney who had handled David's estate. Margaret, I said when she answered, I need you to help me understand some financial documents. Of course. There may be quite a few. When do you want to meet? As soon as possible. She heard something in my voice. Is everything all right? I looked down at the old receipt in my hand. No, I said. I'm beginning to think it hasn't been all right for a very long time. And for the first time since Ryan asked me to fund his divorce, I stopped wondering whether I should give him $85,000. I started wondering what exactly my money would be rescuing him from. Margaret Sloan had been our family attorney for almost 20 years. She had helped David restructure his consulting business, prepared our wills, handled the paperwork after his death, and once spent 40 minutes explaining to me why putting Ryan directly on the deed to my house was a terrible idea. At the time, I had thought she was overly cautious. That Tuesday morning, sitting across from her with the blue box at my feet, I was grateful for every cautious bone in her body. Margaret was 63, silver-haired, precise, and nearly impossible to impress. She opened her legal pad. Start at the beginning. I'm not sure where the beginning is anymore. Then start with what happened most recently. I told her about the divorce. The $85,000. The $42,000 Ryan said Claire had stolen. Then I told her about Claire's phone call. Margaret stopped writing. What exactly did Claire say? That Ryan borrowed against the house? How much? She said almost $100,000 had been available at one point. And Ryan didn't mention this, no. Margaret leaned back. What did he say? He needed your money for attorney fees, protecting the house, keeping Claire from taking everything. That's vague. I know that now. She looked at the blue box. What's in their history? For the next hour, we went through 13 years of it. Wedding checks, bank transfers, receipts, copies of emails, the $35,000 down payment, the $14,700 credit card payoff, David's handwritten ledger. Margaret read quietly. Occasionally, she asked a question. Was this a gift? Yes. This Ryan called it a loan. Any repayment. Not that I remember. This, $6, $200, Sophie's tuition. She continued turning pages. Finally, she removed her glasses. Paige, do you know approximately how much you and David gave Ryan during his marriage? No. Not even roughly. I shook my head. I never added it. David did. She pointed to the ledger. Up to a point. I looked away. He was worried. He had reason to be. That hurt. Not because Margaret was criticizing Ryan. Because she was confirming David had seen something I had spent years refusing to see. What do we do now? Margaret folded her hands. We separate what you know from what you suspect. She asked whether I had any documents connected to Ryan and Claire's house. I had the original closing information because our $35,000 contribution had required a gift letter for their mortgage lender. Margaret searched county property records and other documents available to us. The house had indeed been refinanced, twice. The first refinance happened 4 years after purchase. The second came 3 years later. Then there was a home equity line of credit. My stomach tightened. So Claire was telling the truth. About borrowing against the property, yes. How much? Margaret studied the figures. The credit line appears to have had a limit of $96,000. I stared at her. 96,000. Yes. What happened to it that we cannot determine from public records? I thought about Ryan sitting in my kitchen. Claire stole $42,000. Not once had he mentioned $96,000. Margaret looked at me. You need more documentation. From Claire if she's willing. I called her from Margaret's office. She answered on the second ring. Paige, I'm with Margaret Sloan. There was a pause. My attorney, number mine. Another pause. Okay. I need to understand the equity line. Claire exhaled. I have statements. Can you send them? Yes. Within 20 minutes, the first files arrived. Margaret printed them. We spread the statements across the conference table. At first, they looked like ordinary banking documents. Transfers, payments, withdrawals. But Margaret began marking transactions. Here, she pointed. 20,000. Another page. 15. Another. 8,500. The transfers went to accounts with names I didn't recognize. One appeared connected to a small investment company. Another looked like a brokerage account. A third simply showed an electronic transfer. Could Claire have made these? I asked. Possibly. We shouldn't assume. So I called her again. Claire answered immediately. Those transfers, I said, were they Ryan's? Yes. All of them. The ones going to those accounts? Yes. Did you authorize them? Silence. Some. That word mattered. What do you mean, the first one? Yes. Ryan said he had an investment opportunity through people he worked with. He said we could make the money back quickly. And the others, I didn't know about them until later. Margaret wrote something on her pad. What happened when you found out? I asked. I confronted him. What did he say? That he was fixing it. The phrase made my stomach turn. I had heard its cousins too many times. Reset everything, handle everything, figure it out, fix it. Different words for the same promise. Tomorrow would repair whatever Ryan had done today. When did you move the 42,000? After I found another transfer request. From where? Our joint reserve account. So that money wasn't taken before any of this happened? No. You moved it after discovering he was transferring money. Yes. Why 42? Because that was what remained that I could protect. I closed my eyes. The story Ryan had told me was technically built around a fact. Claire had moved $42,000. He had simply removed everything that explained why. Margaret leaned toward the phone. Claire, did you use any of that money personally? Nombre vacation car apartment deposit num. Where is it now? In the account. All of it. Minus $1, $800. I paid my divorce attorney as a retainer. I documented it. Margaret nodded. Send that statement too. After we ended the call, I sat silently. Margaret waited. Finally, I said, he made it sound like she was running away with his money. That may be how he sees it. How can he see it that way? People often describe events according to how those events affect them, not according to what caused them. I looked at the statements. Then what was the $96,000 for? We don't know all of it yet. But a lot of it went into investments. It appears so. And now he wants $85,000 from me. Margaret nodded slowly. To do what he said to protect himself. That isn't a financial purpose. I looked at her. What do you mean it's an emotional description? If someone asks you for $85,000, you should be able to identify exactly where every dollar is going. That was something I understood. I had spent decades managing budgets. At work, no employee could have walked into my office and requested $85,000 because they needed to protect a project. I would have demanded invoices, contracts, projections. Yet because Ryan was my son, I had nearly accepted an explanation I would have rejected instantly from anyone else. That realization embarrassed me. Margaret must have noticed. Don't do that. Do what? Blame yourself for trusting your child. I helped create this. You helped him financially. That is not the same thing as making his decisions. I looked again at the statements. What should I do? Ask questions. And if he lies, then you learn something. And if he tells the truth, then you learn something too. She gathered the documents into separate folders. Most importantly, don't give him money until you understand what problem he is actually asking you to solve. When I returned home, there were 3 missed calls from Ryan. The 4th came while I was standing in David's study. I answered. Hey, Mom. His voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. Hi. Just checking in. Any thoughts about Friday? His deadline. I looked at the blue box. Yes, I said. I've been thinking. And I have questions. The silence on the other end was immediate. What kind of questions? I picked up the document showing the $96,000 equity line. Financial ones. Another silence. Then Ryan laughed lightly. Mom, divorce is complicated. I'm sure it is. You don't need to get buried in details. I spent 32 years managing corporate finances. I think I can survive a few details. His tone changed. Did Claire call you? I didn't answer. Mom, I want to ask you something. What? I looked at the figure again. $96,000. What happened to the home equity money? For several seconds, my son said absolutely nothing. And in that silence, I received the first honest answer he had given me since this began. He had never expected me to know it existed. Ryan's silence lasted only a few seconds. But when you have known someone for 41 years, a few seconds can tell you more than an hour of conversation. Finally, he exhaled. Claire told you. That isn't what I asked. Of course she did. Ryan, she's trying to turn you against me. What happened to the home equity money? I gave a short, irritated laugh. You make it sound like I stole it. I haven't made it sound like anything. I asked where it went. It went into investments. How much? I don't have every number in front of me. I do. Another silence. $96,000, I said. That was the credit limit. I didn't use all of it. How much did you use, Mom? This is exactly what Claire does. She takes numbers out of context and makes everything look reckless. Then give me the context. His breathing changed. I could hear the frustration building. Can we talk in person? Yes. He arrived 40 minutes later. No coffee this time. No charm. He walked into my living room, dropped his keys on the side table, and stood with his hands on his hips. You talked to her attorney? No. Who did you talk to, Margaret? His expression hardened. You got a lawyer involved. I asked my lawyer to help me understand documents before I considered giving away $85,000. You could have asked me. I did. He looked away. I gestured toward the sofa. Sit down. I'd rather stand. Then stand. That surprised him. Normally, when Ryan became upset, I rushed to calm him. That afternoon, I let him be upset. What were the investments? A distribution company. Some market positions. A private opportunity with two guys I know. Did Claire agree to some of them? All no. Did she know you were using home equity? She knew we had the line. That isn't the same question. He rubbed the back of his neck. Marriage isn't a board meeting, Mom. No. But $96,000 is still $96,000. I told you I didn't use the whole amount. How much? Maybe 70,000 over several years. And what happened to it? Some investments underperformed. Underperformed, lost money. How much? He looked toward the window. I don't know exactly. I almost laughed. You manage sales contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you don't know how much of your family's home equity you lost. That's unfair. Then correct me. He didn't. I thought of David. He would have been calmer than I was. That somehow made me miss him terribly. Why didn't you tell me any of this when you asked for the $85,000? Because it has nothing to do with the divorce. It has everything to do with the divorce. No, Claire has been unhappy for years. Maybe because she discovered financial decisions you made without her. She never supported anything I tried to build. There it was. The shift. From facts to blame. She wanted everything safe, Ryan continued. Savings accounts, retirement plans, no risk, no growth. She wanted to know where her money was going. Our money. Exactly. He stared at me. You're taking her side. I'm asking questions. You never questioned Dad like this. The mention of David felt like a slap. Do not bring your father into this. I'm just saying he understood ambition. Your father also understood accounting. Ryan looked away. I walked to the dining table where I had placed a notebook. Let's talk about the $85,000. His posture changed immediately. What about it? You said you need it for attorneys and to protect yourself. Yes. What does that mean? I gave you the estimate. No. You gave me a number. My attorney thinks this could get ugly. How much is the retainer? 25,000. Then why do you need 85? Because there are other costs. What costs? Appraisal. Mediation. Experts. Cash flow. Cash flow for what? He hesitated. The house. I waited. Ryan sighed. If Claire forces a sale, we lose everything we built. Is there equity left? Yes. How much it depends. On what the market. And the debt. He frowned. Obviously. I sat down. So you want part of my money to keep the house? I want to stabilize things until the divorce is resolved. There was that language Margaret had warned me about. Stabilize, protect, cash flow. Words that sounded responsible while explaining almost nothing. How much of the 85,000 would go toward the house, I don't know exactly. Estimate, maybe 40 or 50. My stomach tightened. Why mortgage payments, legal positioning, possibly buying Claire out. With my money. You're making it sound ugly. I'm making it sound accurate. He stared at me. You helped us buy that house. Yes. Dad always said property was a good investment. Your father also said not to spend money you didn't have. Ryan stood abruptly. I knew this would happen. What Claire gets to you. Margaret gets involved and suddenly I'm on trial. Nobody is putting you on trial. It feels like it. Then imagine how Claire felt discovering money disappearing from her house. His face changed. Her house. The house belongs to both of you. Exactly. Which is why she shouldn't get to force me out of it. I finally understood. Ryan wasn't asking me to help him survive a divorce. I was asking me to preserve the life he wanted after it. The house, the image, the financial cushion. Perhaps even the belief that he could make large mistakes without having to surrender anything important. Ryan, if you can't afford that house after the divorce, maybe you shouldn't keep it. He stared at me as if I had spoken another language. You're serious? Yes. That's Sophie's home. Sophie needs stability. Stability does not require that specific address. You sound exactly like Claire. No. I sound like myself. He paced toward the fireplace. I can fix this if I have enough time. I nearly closed my eyes. Fix it. Again. What happens if I give you 85,000 and 6 months from now? You need another 20, I won't. You told me that before. He turned. When the credit cards. His face went still. That was years ago. You said $14,700 would reset everything. You promised it was the last time. That was different. Everything is different until it happens again. He stared at me. For once, Ryan had no quick answer. Then his expression softened. Mom. I knew that voice. The little boy voice inside the grown man. I'm scared. And there it was, the sentence that almost broke me. I believed him. I still do. Ryan was scared. His marriage was ending. His finances were unstable. The house he loved might be sold. His daughter would split time between two homes. My son was genuinely hurting. But pain did not erase responsibility. I walked over and touched his arm. I love you. His eyes filled. Then help me. I swallowed. I'm trying to understand what help means. I told you what I need. No. You told me what you want. His face hardened again. What's the difference? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He picked up his keys. So you're saying no, I'm saying send me exactly what the $85,000 is for. I already sent you an estimate. Send me everything. Attorney fees, house expenses, debts, every dollar. Why? Because if you expect me to fund something, I need to know what I'm funding. He shook his head. This is humiliating. No, Ryan. This is accounting. He left without hugging me. That evening I sat alone in David's study. For an hour nothing happened. Then my laptop chimed. An email from Ryan. Subject divorce expenses. Attached was a spreadsheet. I opened it. Attorney retainer. Projected legal fees. Property appraisal. Mediation reserve. Mortgage stabilization. Debt restructuring. Then one line stopped me. Marital property stabilization, $47,500. I read it twice. Nearly $50,000. No explanation, no invoice, no supporting document, just a phrase. I printed the spreadsheet and placed it beside David's old ledger. Two documents separated by years. On one side were the amounts David and I had already spent helping Ryan build his marriage. On the other was the amount Ryan now expected me to spend helping him dismantle it without losing the life that marriage had financed. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I added everything together. Every check, every transfer, every emergency, every promise, every time Ryan had said he would pay us back someday. I pulled the blue box closer. Then I reached for my calculator. I started with the wedding. $18,000. I entered the number into a spreadsheet on my laptop, then created 4 columns beside it. Date, amount, purpose, what Ryan had called it. I wasn't sure why that last column mattered at first. By midnight I understood. The honeymoon emergency came next, $300. Ryan had called that temporary. The apartment deposit and first month's rent, $600. He had promised to reimburse us. The down payment on the red brick house, $35,000. A gift. Claire had wanted it documented as a loan. Ryan had objected. Then Sophie arrived. Hospital expenses, $800. I hesitated before entering that one. Part of me still resisted counting anything connected to my granddaughter. Sophie had never asked for any of this. But I remembered what David had told me years earlier. Money is money, Paige. So I entered it. Not because I intended to demand repayment. I wasn't preparing an invoice. I was reconstructing history. There was a difference. The washing machine, the transmission repair, the water damage in the nursery, the roof deductible, Sophie's private school tuition. Each receipt pulled a memory behind it. A phone call, a worried voice, a promise, a reason why this particular problem was different from all the others. Then I reached the $14,700 credit card payoff. I stopped. Ryan's old email was clipped to the statement. Mom, thank you for keeping this between us. Claire doesn't know the full amount, and I need time to fix it before she does. I read it twice. Then I entered the amount. Under what Ryan called it, I typed, the last time. That hurt more than the number. I kept going. There were expenses I had forgotten completely. $850 for emergency dental work when Ryan's insurance coverage changed. $400 toward a family trip they had already booked before realizing their tax refund would be smaller than expected. $200 for a new HVAC compressor. $100 after Ryan called because an automatic payment had overdrawn their checking account days before Christmas. Some amounts were clearly gifts. Others had been described as loans. A few had been repaid partially. Most had not. Around 1 in the morning, I found an envelope in David's handwriting. Ryan repayment notes. Inside were copies of 3 checks. $200, $300, $250, $750. That appeared to be the total Ryan had repaid against thousands he had once promised to return. I stared at those checks for a long time. It wasn't the missing money that upset me. David and I had never needed repayment to survive. What hurt was remembering how many times Ryan's promise had reassured me. I'll pay you back. I'll make it up to you. I won't forget this. Maybe I had mistaken promises for gratitude. By 2 in the morning, my spreadsheet showed more than $150,000, and I wasn't finished. The next morning I called Margaret. I need help with something. What I'm adding everything. There was a pause. Everything you gave Ryan. Everything we can document. Why? Because I need to see it. Margaret didn't question me further. I brought the blue box to her office again. Together we went through David's records more carefully. Margaret found transfers I had overlooked. There was $7,500 David had given Ryan when he changed jobs and went 6 weeks without a commission check. I remembered arguing that it was simply income replacement until Ryan stabilized. There was $5,000 connected to the first failed investment. Ryan had told me he found funding elsewhere. Apparently elsewhere had included David. My husband had never mentioned it to me. That discovery stung. Why wouldn't David tell me? Margaret studied the note attached to the transfer. Maybe because Ryan asked him not to. The handwritten notation was unmistakably David's. Ryan says Paige worries enough. One-time assistance. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because Ryan had used the same strategy with both of us. He told me Claire worried too much. He told David I worried too much. He positioned himself between people who cared about him and convinced each of us that secrecy was kindness. That's clever, I whispered. Margaret looked at me. What is... He made us protect each other from information. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. By lunchtime, the documented total crossed $180,000. I leaned back. $180,000. And change, Margaret said. That can't be right. It is. I stared at the screen. David and I had spent more than twice what Ryan was now asking me to provide for his divorce. But even that wasn't what changed everything. Margaret was sorting through printed emails when she paused. What's this? She handed me a page. I recognized the email address of Ryan's college friend Kevin. Years earlier, Ryan had accidentally included David in a forwarded email chain while discussing the house purchase. David had printed it. Most of the conversation was harmless. They were discussing mortgages, neighborhoods, and renovation plans. Then I saw the sentence. Kevin had written, "Your parents are really giving you $35K for the down payment." Ryan's response appeared underneath. Yeah. Basically, they're advancing my inheritance. Better to use it now while it actually helps. I stopped breathing for a moment. Margaret watched me. Paige, I read it again. Advancing my inheritance. Not helping us. Not giving us an extraordinary gift. Not sacrificing money they spent decades earning. Advancing my inheritance. As though David and I were holding money that already belonged to him. I thought about every thank you. Every promise. Every time I had reassured myself that Ryan understood what our help meant. Maybe he had understood something entirely different. He wrote this before Sophie was born, I whispered. Margaret nodded. So even then, I couldn't finish. Even then, perhaps Ryan had already begun viewing our savings not as ours, but as his future property. Something he could access early if the reason sounded good enough. I drove home with the email on the passenger seat. At a red light, I found myself remembering David's warning. The problem is making help so predictable that somebody starts building their life around receiving it. He had seen it. Not perfectly, not all at once, but he had seen the direction. That afternoon, I sat in his study and looked around at the shelves he had built the desk where he had paid bills every Saturday morning. The old brass lamp he refused to replace because, as he always said, it still works. David had respected money because he understood what it represented. Time, work, choices, years of saying no to one thing so you could say yes to something more important. Ryan seemed to see money differently, especially ours. To him it had become a cushion beneath every risk, and now he wanted another $85,000. I looked at his divorce spreadsheet. Marital property stabilization, $47, $500. Then I looked at our total. More than $180,000. I opened a new document. At the top, I typed financial support provided during Ryan and Claire's marriage. Underneath, I began listing every documented payment. Not because I planned to collect it. Not because I wanted revenge. I wanted my son to see something I had only just begun to see myself. His marriage had not been financed by two people alone. For 13 years, whenever the floor beneath Ryan became uncomfortable, David and I had quietly reinforced it, and Ryan had mistaken that reinforcement for something permanent. My phone buzzed, a message from him. Friday is coming up. I really need to know I can count on you. I read those words several times. Then I looked at the receipts spread across David's desk. For most of Ryan's adult life, counting on me had meant knowing I would eventually reach for my checkbook. This time I reached for another receipt instead. Claire asked to meet me at a small coffee shop near Bird Park. She chose a table in the back away from the windows. When I arrived, she was already there with a cup of tea and a thick gray folder resting beside her purse. For 13 years, Claire had been my daughter-in-law. I had watched her become a wife, a mother, and a woman who carried far more anxiety than I had ever understood. But that afternoon she looked older than 39. Not physically, tired in a deeper way. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I almost didn't. I understand. I sat across from her. I don't want this to become you and me against Ryan. Neither do I. He's my son. I know. And Sophie's father. I know that too. Claire wrapped both hands around her tea. I'm not asking you to hate him, Paige. Good. Because I won't. She nodded. I don't hate him either. That surprised me. After everything, Claire looked down. That's what makes divorce harder than people think. Sometimes you leave someone you still love because loving them stopped making the situation safe. The word safe bothered me. Did Ryan ever hurt you? Not physically? She answered immediately. I felt myself relax slightly. Then she continued. But there are other ways to stop feeling safe in a marriage. She touched the gray folder. Mostly I stopped trusting what was real. I waited. Claire opened it. Inside were bank statements, printed emails, handwritten notes, and copies of household budgets. She slid one sheet toward me. It was a list of monthly expenses: mortgage, utilities, insurance, Sophie's tuition, groceries, car payments, credit cards. At the bottom, Claire had written shortfall $2,860. What is this, our budget from 18 months ago? How are you short almost $3,000 every month? We weren't. Not always. I don't understand. Ryan's commissions varied. Some months were great, some weren't. But he spent as if every month would be a great month. I remembered David saying almost exactly that. Tomorrow's success will solve today's obligations. What happened when commissions were low? Claire gave me a sad smile. Ryan figured something out. The phrase made my stomach turn. She showed me another document. A transfer, then another. Credit card advances, a brokerage withdrawal, money moved from savings. He kept moving things around, she said. Every time I thought we were stable, I'd discover the stability had come from somewhere else. Why didn't you stop him? The question came out sharper than I intended. Claire flinched. I immediately regretted it. I'm sorry. No, it's fair. It isn't. She looked toward the window. I tried. How budgets? Separate spending accounts. Counseling. You went to counseling for 6 months. Ryan had never mentioned it. What happened? He stopped going. Why, he said the counselor was taking my side. That sounded painfully familiar. Claire continued. I suggested selling the house 2 years ago. 2 years? We could have paid off most of the debt and moved somewhere smaller. What did Ryan say? That selling would be admitting failure. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. The house wasn't just property to him. It was proof. Proof that he was successful. Proof that his risks were justified. Proof that everything had worked, even when it hadn't. Claire opened the folder again. There's something else. She pulled out several printed pages. The first looked like notes from a financial planning session. I recognized Ryan's handwriting. What is this? I found it in his desk 6 months ago. There were headings: 5-year plan, debt reduction, investment recovery, property strategy. Then a section labeled family resources. Underneath were several lines: potential inheritance mom, Richmond property paid off, retirement assets substantial, emergency bridge if required. My mouth went dry. What does emergency bridge mean? I asked him. What did he say? That you'd help if something catastrophic happened. I stared at the page. Did he ask me? No. Did I ever agree to this? Not that I know. I read the words again. Potential inheritance. My husband had been dead 6 years. I was alive, healthy, living independently, and my son had placed my estate into his financial strategy as though I were already gone. I'm 68, I whispered. Claire's eyes filled. I know. He's planning around my death. I don't think he thinks of it that way. How else could he think of it, I think? She stopped. Say it. I think Ryan sees your money as part of the family's money. No. My voice came out firmer than I expected. That is my money. I know. David and I earned it. I know. We saved it. I know, Paige. I looked at her. For the first time, I understood why she had sounded so uncomfortable whenever we helped. She had seen the transformation before I had. A gift becoming an expectation becoming a resource becoming an entitlement. Did you know about the credit card debt I paid after David died? Claire's expression changed. What credit card debt? That answered my question. 4 cards. $14,700. She stared at me. When I told her, Claire covered her mouth. Oh my God. He told me you knew there was debt, just not the full amount. I knew we had about 5,000. My stomach tightened. So there was more than I knew too. Claire nodded slowly. That's what I mean. I never knew which version of our finances was real. I thought about the secrecy. Ryan telling David not to worry me. Ryan telling me not to worry Claire. Ryan telling Claire not to worry because I would help. He had built separate rooms of information and kept each of us inside one. Why did you stay? Claire looked at me for a long time. Because he's not a monster. I said nothing. He's funny. He's a good father in many ways. He remembers birthdays. He makes pancakes with Sophie every Saturday. When my mother had surgery, he drove 3 hours to sit with her. Her voice broke. That's what makes this so painful. People want divorce to have one villain and one victim. Sometimes it's just years of broken trust until love can't carry the weight anymore. I reached across the table and touched her hand. I'm sorry. She shook her head. You don't owe me an apology. I helped him hide things. You didn't know. Sometimes I did. I told her about the $14,700, about Ryan asking me to keep it secret, about the day she came to my house asking whether something was wrong. I told you to trust him. Claire looked down. I remember. I'm sorry. She squeezed my hand. So am I. We sat quietly. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me. The $42,000. What are you going to do with it? Leave it untouched until the attorneys determine what happens. You're not trying to take it, no. And the house, I want it sold. For the equity. For the debt. She gave a tired laugh. I don't want that house anymore, Paige. Every room reminds me of something we couldn't afford. When we stood to leave, Claire pushed the gray folder toward me. Take this. I shouldn't. They're copies. I looked down at Ryan's financial plan. Potential inheritance, Mom. Emergency bridge if required. My son had asked whether he could count on me. Now I finally understood what that question meant. Not emotionally, financially. He had been counting on me for years. Counting my house. Counting my savings. Counting an inheritance he did not yet own. Perhaps even counting the years until it became his. I drove home with the gray folder beside David's blue box on the passenger seat. At a stoplight, I looked at them. 2 collections of documents. One kept by my husband, because he feared Ryan might forget how much we had given. The other kept by Claire because she feared Ryan might forget how much he had taken. For the first time, I realized the divorce was not creating Ryan's financial crisis. It was exposing one that had been hidden for years. And if I gave him $85,000 now, I wouldn't be helping him through a sudden tragedy. I would simply be financing the next chapter of the same pattern. I did not sleep much after meeting Claire. Her gray folder sat on the dining room table all night. David's blue box sat beside it. 2 containers, 2 histories. 2 people who had spent years documenting Ryan for entirely different reasons. David had kept records because he believed money could distort memory. Claire had kept records because she had stopped trusting the version of reality her husband gave her. And I had spent most of those same years doing neither. I had simply believed my son. The next morning, I carried everything into David's study. Sunlight came through the blinds in thin stripes across his desk. For 6 years, I had preserved that room almost exactly as he left it. His books were still arranged alphabetically by author. His old calculator remained in the top drawer. Even the yellow legal pads he bought in bulk were stacked on the shelf. I sat in his chair. Then I opened the spreadsheet I had started. Financial support provided during Ryan and Claire's marriage. The title suddenly felt incomplete. Those numbers were not merely financial support. Each one represented a moment. The $18,000 wedding contribution represented excitement. The honeymoon charge represented embarrassment Ryan had promised was temporary. The $35,000 down payment represented a future. David and I believed we were helping them build. The hospital bill represented Sophie entering our lives. The private school tuition represented opportunity. The roof repair represented security. The credit card payoff represented secrecy. Every number carried an emotion behind it. Hope, fear, love, guilt, trust. and eventually exhaustion. I began attaching documents to each entry: receipt, bank transfer, email, check, statement. By noon, I had built a record that would have impressed the financial department where I used to work. But I still felt unsettled. Something was missing. I called Margaret. I want to organize everything properly. For Ryan. For me first. That's a better reason. I smiled faintly. I want dates, amounts, purposes, whether each payment was a gift or something he promised to repay. Do you intend to demand repayment number good? Why good? Because that would turn this into a different kind of fight. I don't want a fight. What do you want? I looked at the blue box, the truth to be impossible to misunderstand. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then keep it factual. That became my rule. No accusations, no insults, no emotional commentary. Just history. We worked together that afternoon. Some entries had perfect documentation. Others required cross-checking bank statements. A few amounts were excluded because I could not prove whether they had been gifts for birthdays or ordinary family generosity. I wanted the final record to be beyond argument. At one point, Margaret looked at the total. More than $180,000. I know. And you're certain you don't want this characterized as debt? I'm certain. Why, because most of it wasn't debt. I paused. We gave it because we loved him. Margaret nodded. Then say that. Those words stayed with me. That evening after Margaret left, I returned to David's study. I wanted to check one more drawer. I wasn't looking for anything specific. Perhaps that was why I found it. At the back of the bottom filing drawer was a cream-colored envelope. My name was written across the front. Paige. I knew David's handwriting instantly. My hands started trembling. There was no date on the envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside were 3 handwritten pages. I sat down before reading. Paige. If you're reading this, either you finally decided to clean out my files, which would be a miracle, or you found it while looking for something else. I laughed. Then I started crying. That was David. Even on paper, he knew exactly how to make me hear his voice. I continued. Most of the letter was about practical things: insurance policies, business records, people to call. Then halfway down the second page, I found Ryan's name. There is one thing I worry about, and you already know what it is. Ryan. Not because he is bad. Please never confuse weakness with badness. Our son has a good heart, but he has developed a dangerous belief that consequences are temporary because somebody who loves him will eventually soften them. I stopped. For several seconds, I could not continue. When I finally did, the words became harder. We have helped create that belief. I have too. There were times I gave him money because it was easier than watching him struggle. There were times I called it generosity, when part of me knew I was buying peace. If I'm gone before you, please remember this. Do not let our money become the reason Ryan never learns what his own choices cost. I pressed the paper against my chest. It felt as if David had reached across 6 years and put his hand on mine. The final paragraph was shorter. Help him when help gives him strength. Do not rescue him when rescue only gives him permission to repeat the same mistake. He may be angry with you. Let him be angry. He will still be your son when the anger passes. Love, David. I sat there until the sunlight disappeared from the room. For years I had thought the blue box was David's way of keeping score. Now I understood. I had never wanted repayment. He had wanted perspective. The receipts were not evidence that Ryan owed us $180,000. They were evidence that love had repeatedly absorbed the cost of his choices. And each time it did, Ryan learned something. Unfortunately, it was the wrong lesson. He learned that a financial mistake did not necessarily mean giving something up. Mom and Dad could help. A failed investment did not necessarily mean changing his lifestyle. Someone could bridge the gap. Debt did not necessarily mean fewer vacations or a cheaper car. There was always another solution, another transfer, another rescue. And now divorce did not necessarily mean selling a house he could no longer afford. Mom had money. I opened Ryan's spreadsheet again. Marital property stabilization, $47,500. For the first time, the phrase almost made me laugh. He did not want to stabilize marital property. He wanted to stabilize himself against consequences. I created a new PDF. The first page contained a simple title: Financial support provided during your marriage. The pages that followed contained dates, amounts, and supporting records. No judgment. No accusations. At the end, I added the total. Then I stopped. My cursor blinked beneath the number. I thought about adding David's letter. I decided against it. That letter was mine. Ryan was not ready for it. Perhaps someday, but not yet. My phone rang. Ryan. I let it ring once before answering. Hi. Mom, tomorrow's Friday. I know. My attorney needs an answer. I understand. So I looked at the PDF on my screen. I'll send you something tomorrow morning. I could hear relief enter his voice. Thank God. He assumed I meant money. How early? Early enough. Do you need my wire information? No. A pause. How are you sending it? Email. Another pause. Mom, you can't email $85,000. I know. He laughed. For the first time in days, he sounded relaxed. Okay. You scared me for a second. I almost told him then. Instead, I looked at David's letter. He may be angry with you. Let him be angry. Get some sleep, Ryan. You too. Good night. Love you, Mom. My throat tightened. I love you too. After we hung up, I attached the receipts to the PDF. $180,000 worth of documented history. Ryan had asked me to finance the end of his marriage. I was finally ready to answer him. But I would not answer with another check. This time my son was going to receive something far more valuable than money. He was going to receive the bill for the story he had been telling himself. At 7:12 Friday morning, I sat at David's desk with my finger resting on the trackpad. The email was ready. To Ryan James. Subject: what I'm willing to contribute. For nearly 10 minutes I did nothing. I kept thinking about all the other times money had passed between us. There had never been this much hesitation. When Ryan needed help with the wedding, I wrote a check. When he called from his honeymoon, I gave him my credit card information. When he needed the house down payment, I signed the gift letter. When the credit card debt appeared after David died, I transferred $14,700 before I had even allowed myself a full day to think. Money had always moved quickly. Questions came later. Sometimes they never came at all. That morning I was reversing the order. Questions first. Consequences second. Money nowhere. I opened the PDF one last time. Page after page showed the history of Ryan's marriage from a perspective he had never been forced to see. $18,000 wedding expenses, $2,300 honeymoon expenses, $3,600 apartment deposit and first month's rent, $35,000 home down payment, $4,800 medical expenses following Sophie's birth. Then came repairs, tuition, debt, emergencies, temporary setbacks that somehow became permanent entries in David's records. At the bottom of the final accounting page was the total, more than $180,000. I had deliberately included no demand for repayment. I did not write that Ryan owed me. That wasn't the point. I wanted him to understand something more difficult. For 13 years, the life he described as something he had built had been reinforced again and again by people he barely remembered thanking. I returned to the email. Ryan, you asked me to contribute $85,000 toward your divorce. Before deciding, I reviewed the financial support your father and I provided during your marriage. I am attaching the documentation because I think both of us need to understand the history clearly. I love you, Mom. Then I clicked send. For several seconds, nothing happened. The house remained completely quiet. I expected to feel powerful. I didn't. I felt sick. This was my son. Not an employee whose budget I had rejected. Not a stranger asking for money. My child. The little boy whose hand I had held on his first day of kindergarten. The teenager I waited up for when he learned to drive. The young man David hugged on his wedding night. I walked into the kitchen and made coffee. At 7:26 my phone rang. Ryan. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. What is this? No hello. Good morning, Ryan. Mom, what did you send me? The information I told you I would send. I thought you were sending the money. I never said that. You knew what I thought. Yes. That's unbelievable. I closed my eyes. Did you read it? I'm looking at it right now. Then read all of it. What is this supposed to prove? Nothing. It's a record. A record of what financial support your father and I provided during your marriage. Ryan laughed sharply. So now you're billing me? No. It sure looks like a bill. I'm not asking you to repay it. Then why send it? Because you told me I owed you $85,000. Silence. I continued. You said, after everything I've done for this family, you owe me this. I needed to understand what owe meant. That was said in anger. I know. So you punish me by keeping score. I'm not punishing you. Dad would be disgusted by this. My hand tightened around the phone. For one dangerous second, anger almost took control. Then I remembered David's letter. Let him be angry. Your father kept most of those records. Ryan stopped. What? The blue box in his study? The handwritten ledger? The receipts? Most of it was his. That's ridiculous. It's true. Dad didn't keep tabs on me. He kept records. Why? Because he believed money changes people's memories. Ryan was silent again. Then he said, Claire put you up to this. No. She's manipulating you. No. Margaret, no. Then what happened to you? That question hurt, not because it was cruel, because I knew exactly what he meant. The mother Ryan knew would have solved this. She would have worried about his stress. She would have told herself divorce was exceptional. She would have found a way to justify another transfer. What happened to me? I finally listened to the part of myself I had been silencing for years. I looked at the numbers. I said, that's what happened. This isn't about numbers. You're asking me for $85,000. It is partly about numbers. I'm losing my marriage. I know. I could lose my house. I know. And you're sitting there talking about receipts. Yes. His breathing grew louder. Fine. What do you want? I don't want anything. You obviously do. No, Ryan. I want you to handle your divorce with the resources you actually have. I can't. Then your life may have to change. He laughed bitterly. There it is. What you want me to suffer. No. You think I need some lesson. I think you need to make decisions based on what you can afford. You sound like Claire. I sound like your father. That stopped him. I opened the PDF on my laptop. There's one page you haven't reached yet. What page? The last one. I heard papers moving. Then silence. Longer this time. On the final page beneath the documented total, I had written one sentence. Amount I will contribute toward ending your marriage, $0. When Ryan spoke again, his voice had changed. You're serious? Yes. 0, yes. After everything, I almost laughed at the irony. Instead, I said quietly, especially after everything. You have the money. That isn't the issue. You could write this check without changing your life. That also isn't the issue. Then what is? I looked toward David's study. The issue is that every time you make a financial decision, you cannot sustain someone else absorbs the consequences. That's not fair. Your father and I helped with your wedding, your honeymoon, your apartment, your house, your debts, your emergencies, your child's tuition, repairs, investments. You offered yes. I raised my voice for the first time. And I am not saying you stole that money. I'm saying our generosity became part of your financial planning. Ryan said nothing. I saw the document. Ryan. What document? Family resources. Silence. Potential inheritance. My house. My retirement assets. Emergency bridge if required. His voice dropped. Claire had no right to show you that. So it's real. It was just planning. With my money. Future money. I felt something inside me go cold. I'm still alive. That isn't what I meant. But it is what you wrote. Mom. No. My voice was quiet again. My home is not your financial resource. My retirement is not your emergency fund. And my death is not part of your recovery strategy. That's disgusting. I never said that. You didn't have to. He exhaled hard. So that's it for the money, yes. What am I supposed to do? Talk to your attorney. Sell what you can't afford. Negotiate with Claire. Change your lifestyle. You make it sound easy. I don't think it will be easy. Then how can you do this to me? Because I love you, I thought. But I knew he wasn't ready to hear those words that way. I'm not doing this to you. I looked at the receipt spread across the desk. I'm just not paying to make it disappear. Ryan hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. My heart hurt. There was no victory in that room, no satisfaction, no revenge, only grief. But beneath the grief was something unfamiliar: relief. For the first time in my son's adult life, he had brought me a financial emergency, and I had allowed it to remain his. Ryan did not call me again that Friday. He waited until Saturday afternoon. I had spent most of the morning convincing myself that perhaps the worst of his anger had passed. I cleaned the kitchen, watered the plants on my back porch, and even drove to the grocery store. At 2:17, my phone rang. Ryan. I answered. Hi. I hope you're happy. Those were his first words. My stomach tightened. No, Ryan, I'm not happy. You got what you wanted. What did I want? Claire's attorney knows I don't have the money. I didn't tell Claire anything about my decision. You didn't have to. She knows you're on her side. I'm not on anyone's side. He laughed. Please stop saying that. I'm your mother. I love you. Claire is Sophie's mother and I care about her. I don't need one of you to be my enemy. She's trying to take my house. It's also her house. There you go again. I closed my eyes. Ryan, what happened today? My attorney says if I can't show enough liquidity, pushing to keep the house is going to be difficult. There it was. Not starvation, not homelessness, not an inability to hire counsel. The house. You may have to sell it. You keep saying that like it means nothing. I know it means something. No, you don't. I helped you buy it. The line went silent. I continued more softly. I remember walking through that kitchen before you closed. I remember your father putting Sophie's crib together upstairs. I remember every Christmas dinner in that dining room. Of course it means something to me. Then help me save it. There was genuine pain in his voice. That was what made boundaries difficult. If Ryan had been cruel, every moment saying no would have been simple. But he wasn't. He was my frightened son watching the life he had built come apart. I can't do that. You mean you won't? Yes. He went quiet. I won't. His voice changed. Cold now. You've become very comfortable saying no. No, I've become capable of saying it. So this is some empowerment thing for you. No. You send me 13 years of receipts and suddenly you're Mother of the Year. That's enough. No, it isn't. His voice rose. You helped us voluntarily. Nobody forced you. And now you're using every birthday, every emergency, every gift, like evidence that I'm some kind of parasite. I never called you that. You didn't have to. Those receipts were not a bill. Then why send them? Because you told me I owed you. I told you I needed my mother, and I am still your mother. Not when it matters. That one hurt. I let the silence sit between us. Then I said, if being your mother requires financing every crisis, then we have misunderstood our relationship for a long time. You have plenty of money. That does not make it yours. I never said it was mine. You included my assets in your financial planning. We already talked about that. No, you explained it away. I was planning for the future. My death is not your financial plan. Stop saying that. For the first time, Ryan sounded shaken rather than angry. I don't want you to die. I know. Then why make it sound like that? Because you need to understand what those words looked like to me. He was silent. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I'm your only child. Yes. Who else would you leave it to? I felt something inside me settle. There was the assumption again. Not malicious, not even hidden anymore. Simply embedded. That is my decision. So now you're threatening my inheritance, no? Sounds like it. I am telling you that while I am alive, my money belongs to me. Fine. He said it like an insult. Keep it. I intend to. Another silence. Then Ryan said the one thing I had not prepared myself to hear. Maybe you shouldn't expect to see Sophie for a while. My entire body went still. What? You heard me. Do not use your daughter this way. I'm not using anyone. You are angry with me, so you're threatening my relationship with my granddaughter. I'm saying our family needs space. Does Claire agree? This has nothing to do with Claire. Sophie is with Claire this weekend, isn't she? He didn't answer. Ryan, you always think you know everything now. I know Sophie is not a bargaining chip. You chose Claire. No. You chose money. No. I chose not to give you money. Those are not the same thing. They feel the same to me. I'm sorry they do. You should be. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone. That conversation hurt more than sending the receipts. Money was money. Sophie was different. She was 13 now, tall for her age, obsessed with mystery novels, and still willing to bake cookies with me on rainy afternoons. The thought of losing her, because I refused to finance her father's divorce, terrified me. For 10 minutes I nearly broke. I opened my banking app. I actually looked at the balance. I imagined calling Ryan. Fine, I'll help. Maybe not $85,000. Maybe $30,000. Maybe enough to calm him. Enough to keep Sophie. Then I saw David's letter lying on the table. He may be angry with you. Let him be angry. I closed the banking app. At 5:40 my phone rang again. This time it was Claire. I answered immediately. Is Sophie okay? Claire sounded startled. Yes. She's upstairs doing homework. Why I sat down. Ryan said maybe I shouldn't expect to see her for a while. Silence. Then Claire said very clearly, no. I felt tears come to my eyes. He's angry, I understand that, but he doesn't get to decide this alone. I don't want to interfere with your custody situation. You aren't. I also don't want Sophie caught between us. She won't be. Claire's voice softened. Paige, whatever is happening between you and Ryan is between adults. Sophie loves you. I covered my mouth. I thought... My voice broke. Claire waited. I thought I might lose her. You're not losing her because you refused to write a check. That sentence released something in me. I started crying. Not dramatically, quietly. The exhausted crying of a woman who had spent years believing love could disappear if she stopped being useful. Claire stayed on the phone. After a while, she said Sophie asked if she could come over tomorrow. I laughed through my tears. Did she? She wants to finish that puzzle you started. I'd like that. I'll bring her at 11. Thank you. Before we hung up, Claire added, Ryan loves Sophie. He's scared. He said something cruel because he wanted you to feel as powerless as he feels. That doesn't excuse it. No. She paused. But maybe it explains it. The next morning, Sophie arrived carrying a backpack and a half-finished mystery novel. She hugged me before I could say anything. Dad's being weird, she whispered. I pulled back. I'm not discussing your father with you. She rolled her eyes. Adults always say that when adults are being weird. Despite everything, I laughed. We spent the afternoon working on the puzzle. I didn't mention divorce. I didn't mention money. I didn't mention her father's threat. At one point, Sophie leaned against my shoulder while searching for a missing corner piece. And I realized something. My relationship with my granddaughter had never been purchased by tuition payments, Christmas gifts, vacations, or emergency checks. She loved me because I was her grandmother. That should have been obvious. But when you spend enough years proving love through giving, you can start fearing that the giving is what makes you lovable. Ryan had threatened the one thing he believed would make me surrender. For a few minutes it nearly worked. But this time I did not pay. And the person I had been most afraid of losing was sitting beside me anyway. The truth about Ryan and Claire's marriage did not arrive in one dramatic confession. It arrived in documents, bank statements, property appraisals, tax returns, credit card balances, investment records. The ordinary paperwork of a divorce forced two people to put numbers beside years of decisions they had spent too long avoiding. 3 weeks after I sent Ryan the receipts, Margaret called me. Do you have a minute? Yes. Ryan contacted me. I sat straighter. My Ryan, I assume you don't have another one. Despite everything, I smiled. Why he wanted to know whether the money you and David gave him could be characterized as loans. My heart sank. Why would he ask that his attorney is trying to determine what obligations exist around the marital estate? Did you tell him I told him I represent you, not him, and that most of the documented transfers appear to have been gifts, unless specific agreements say otherwise? I closed my eyes. Is he trying to make Claire responsible for half? I can't speculate. But I knew my son, or perhaps I was finally learning to. What did he say when you told him? He asked whether you intended to sue him for repayment. What I told him, you had expressed no such intention. I stood and walked toward the window. That's what he thinks the receipts were. He may still be trying to understand why you sent them. I told him why. Understanding words and accepting them are different things. That was true. Ryan had spent years translating help into entitlement. Perhaps it would take more than one PDF to reverse that. Over the next 2 months, I heard pieces of what was happening. Some came from Ryan, some came from Claire. I refused to become a messenger between them. If Claire complained about Ryan, I stopped her gently. If this concerns the divorce, tell your attorney. If Ryan complained about Claire, I gave him the same answer. It frustrated both of them. But for the first time, their marriage was no longer being managed through me. Eventually, the financial picture became clear. There was no secret lover, no hidden affair, no dramatic betrayal of that kind. Ryan had never cheated on Claire. Claire had never cheated on Ryan. The betrayal was quieter. It had happened through numbers. The home equity line had funded several investments, only one of which produced meaningful returns. Others lost money. Ryan had also moved money between credit cards and accounts in ways that made their monthly finances appear healthier than they were. He had not been stealing money to live a secret life. In some ways, that made the truth sadder. He genuinely believed he could fix everything. One successful deal, one strong commission quarter, one investment rebound. Then all the hidden problems would disappear before Claire ever needed to know. Except they didn't. The house became the center of the divorce. Ryan wanted to keep it. Claire wanted it sold. An appraisal placed the value higher than either expected. But after the mortgage balance, the equity line, and other obligations were considered, there was far less real wealth in the property than Ryan had imagined. One evening he called me. His voice sounded tired. "We're selling." I sat quietly. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" "Yes. You told me to sell it." "I told you that you might have to." "Same difference." "No, it isn't." He sighed. "The realtor thinks we can list next month." "That's probably good." "I hate when you talk like this." "Like what?" "Calm." I almost laughed. "What would you prefer?" "I don't know. Maybe act like this matters." "It matters very much." "Doesn't sound like it." I looked around my kitchen. "Ryan, I remember the day you bought that house." He said nothing. "I remember your father standing in Sophie's nursery with an instruction manual upside down because he refused to admit he needed his glasses." A small sound came through the phone. Almost a laugh. "I remember. I remember Christmas mornings there. Sophie's first birthday. Your 10th anniversary dinner." My voice softened. Selling the house does not erase those things. It feels like failure. There it was. The real wound. Why? Because I was supposed to be further ahead by now. According to whom? Everybody. Who is everybody? He didn't answer. I thought about the expensive SUV, the renovations, the investments, the private school, the constant pressure to maintain the appearance of upward movement. "Your father drove the same truck for 14 years, I said. "What does that have to do with anything?" "He could have bought a new one any time. Dad was different." "Yes. How he never needed his possessions to tell people he was successful." Ryan went quiet. "That's a cheap shot. It wasn't meant to be." "Well, it was. I'm sorry." For once I meant the apology without withdrawing the point. A week later, Ryan sold the SUV. He didn't tell me directly. Sophie did. "Dad got a boring car," she announced while we were making sandwiches. "What kind?" "A used Honda." "There are worse tragedies." She laughed. "Don't tell him I said it's boring." "I won't." The house went on the market the following month. It sold quickly. Ryan moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes away. Claire rented a townhouse closer to Sophie's school. Their attorneys worked out temporary custody arrangements while negotiations continued. For the first time since Ryan had graduated college, his lifestyle became smaller. Smaller home, smaller car, smaller monthly budget. And something unexpected happened. he survived. The world did not end. Sophie still loved him. He still went to work. He still had friends. He still made pancakes on Saturday mornings when Sophie stayed with him. One afternoon, Margaret called. "How are you doing better?" "And Ryan?" "I don't know. That may be progress." I smiled. "You know, I thought refusing the money would destroy him. Did it no? What did it do?" I thought about that. It made his problem stay his long enough for him to solve part of it himself. There was silence. Then Margaret said, "That sounds like something David would have appreciated." After we hung up, I went into his study. The blue box remained on the desk. I opened it and looked at the receipts. For months I had thought of them as evidence of how much Ryan had received. Now I saw something else. They were evidence of how often we had prevented him from experiencing ordinary consequences. A broken budget became our transfer. An unaffordable purchase became our emergency. A risky decision became our rescue. I had feared consequences would crush my son. Instead, consequences were doing something money never had. They were teaching him. Not quickly, not painlessly, but genuinely. Ryan was paying his own rent, making payments on his own debt, driving a car he could afford, meeting his attorney without asking me to cover the bill. He had not apologized. Not yet. He was still angry. But for the first time in his adult life, my son was living entirely inside the financial boundaries of his own choices. And although it broke my heart to watch him lose the house David and I had helped him buy, I finally understood something my husband had tried to teach me years earlier. Sometimes losing what you cannot afford to keep is not destruction. Sometimes it is the first honest step toward rebuilding. Almost 6 months passed before Ryan came to my house without needing anything. That distinction mattered more than I would have imagined. During those months we had spoken occasionally. At first every conversation was stiff. He called on my birthday. I called when Sophie told me he had the flu. We exchanged polite messages about holidays and school schedules. There were no requests for money. There were also no apologies. I learned not to force either one. Claire and I developed a different relationship during that time. Not friendship exactly. Not at first. We were two women connected by Sophie and by a man we both loved differently. That could have become dangerous. I refused to let our conversations turn into sessions where we cataloged Ryan's failures. One afternoon, Claire started telling me about an argument over a credit card charge. I stopped her gently. "Claire, I care about you. I know. But I'm still his mother." She nodded. "I'm sorry." "You don't need to apologize. I just don't want our relationship built on being angry with Ryan." She looked at me for a moment. "Neither do I." That became our rule. We talked about Sophie, work, books, her mother's health, sometimes David, occasionally the divorce, but only when it directly affected the family. I discovered that I liked Claire independently of her marriage to my son. Perhaps I always had. One Saturday morning, Sophie and I were baking muffins when the doorbell rang. I wiped flour from my hands and opened the door. Ryan stood there. He was holding the blue box, not the original. That was still in David's study. This was a similar document box he had purchased himself. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Can I come in?" "Of course." He followed me into the kitchen. Sophie looked up. "Dad." "Hey, Soph. What are you doing here, seeing Grandma?" She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "You never just see Grandma." Ryan looked at me. "That's apparently part of the problem." I almost smiled. Sophie returned to the muffins. "I'm going upstairs while they bake." When she disappeared, Ryan placed the box on the kitchen table. "What's that?" "The receipts." My stomach tightened. "What about them? I printed everything you sent. All of it, every page." He sat down. I remained standing. "Why?" At first, he gave a humorless laugh. "Because I was furious." I sat across from him. "I figured. I thought you were humiliating me. That wasn't my intention. I know that now." Those 5 words caught me off guard. Ryan opened the box. The documents were organized into folders: wedding, house, debt, Sophie, repairs, other. He had done what David used to do. He had organized the history. I read them maybe 20 times. Why? Because I wanted to find mistakes. That sounded exactly like my son. Did you? A couple. I raised an eyebrow. He smiled faintly. You counted a dishwasher as 1,800. It was 1,650. I laughed. I'll alert the auditors. And that transmission repair, I paid Dad back $300. That's documented. I know. His smile disappeared. That's when it got bad. What did seeing $300 listed like it mattered? It did matter. No. He shook his head. What mattered was how proud I remembered being when I gave it to him. I said nothing. I had completely forgotten the repair was almost $4,000. He looked down at the table. In my memory, I paid Dad back. I felt a chill. Money changes people's memories. David had been right again. Ryan continued. I remembered the wedding as something you and Dad wanted to pay for. We did want to help. I know. But I forgot you originally offered 10. I nodded. I remembered buying the house because I got promoted. You did get promoted. And I remembered the down payment like it was some minor boost. It was $35,000. I know that now. He rubbed his hands together. The worst one was the credit cards. I waited. I told myself for years that I had handled that debt. My throat tightened. You asked me to pay it. I know. You asked me not to tell Claire. I know. Then how did you remember handling it? He looked directly at me. I don't know. There was something different in his face. Not shame alone, recognition. I think every time somebody rescued me, I rewrote the story afterward so I could still feel like the person who solved the problem. That was the most honest thing I had ever heard my son say about money. I'm sorry, he said. My eyes filled. For what? He laughed sadly. Do you want the alphabetical list or chronological, Ryan? For making you feel like your money belonged to me. I swallowed. For threatening you with Sophie. That hurt. I know. That hurt more than the money. I know. He looked down. I was desperate to make you change your mind. I almost did. His head lifted. You did? I opened my banking app. Ryan closed his eyes. I'm glad you didn't. That surprised me. Really, no. He laughed. Part of me still wishes you had written the check. At least that was honest. But another part knows what I would have done. What kept the house. And probably blamed Claire for another year. I leaned back. Have you two settled everything almost? Are you okay? He considered the question. No. Then he added, but I think I will be. I reached across the table and took his hand. For months I had imagined this moment. In some versions, Ryan apologized dramatically. In others, I delivered the perfect speech. Reality was quieter. Two people sitting at a kitchen table, both admitting they had made mistakes. I owe you money, he said. No. Yes. Ryan, most of that was given freely, but some wasn't. That isn't what I need from you. What do you need? I thought carefully. I need you never to build your life around what you think I might leave you. He nodded. I won't. My retirement is mine. I know. My house is mine. I know. And if I help Sophie someday, that will be my decision. I understand. I studied his face. Do you? Yes. Then he smiled faintly. I'm learning. That was enough. Not perfect. Enough. He started closing the box. Keep it, I said. The receipts. Yes. Why your father kept the originals? Because he wanted history remembered accurately. Ryan rested his hand on the lid. Did Dad really think I was that bad? No. I hesitated. He worried you might never learn what your choices cost. Ryan looked toward the hallway leading to David's study. I wish he were here. So do I. Every day. Ryan stood to leave. At the door he turned. Mom. Yes, thank you. For what? He looked back at the blue box. I expected him to say for the money. Instead, he said, for finally not giving me any. Then he left. I stood at the door watching him walk toward his used Honda. I had forgiven my son long before he apologized. But forgiveness did not mean returning to the old arrangement. I would love him. I would listen. I would invite him to dinner. I would show up when life hurt. But I would no longer confuse removing consequences with love. For the first time, Ryan seemed to understand that too. And the blue box that had once felt like an accusation had become something neither David nor I could have predicted. Not a record of debt, a record of lessons finally being learned. 1 year after Ryan walked into my kitchen asking for $85,000, the red brick house belonged to another family. I drove past it once, not intentionally. There was road construction on my usual route to Sophie's school, and the detour took me through Ryan and Claire's old neighborhood. The maple tree was still there. Someone had painted the front door blue. 2 bicycles rested beside the garage, and a little girl I didn't recognize was drawing with sidewalk chalk near the driveway. For a moment I expected grief. Instead I felt something gentler. That house had been important to us, but it had never been the family. I understood that now. Ryan and Claire's divorce was finalized in February. There was no courtroom explosion, no dramatic victory, no winner. The house proceeds were divided after the remaining obligations were settled. Claire kept the $42,000 she had protected inside the marital accounting until their attorneys determined how everything should be distributed. Ryan stopped calling it stolen money. That mattered. They established shared custody of Sophie, and although they still disagreed, sometimes they had learned to communicate without making every disagreement a referendum on 13 years of marriage. Ryan stayed in his apartment. He could have moved somewhere more impressive after receiving his portion from the house sale. He didn't. "I like being able to pay the rent without checking my commission statement first," he told me. I smiled when he said that. David would have understood. Ryan kept the used Honda too. Sophie continued calling it boring. Ryan started calling it financially responsible transportation, which made her roll her eyes every time. The changes were small. That was why I trusted them. Ryan did not suddenly become a different person. He was still ambitious, still optimistic, still capable of convincing himself that the next opportunity might be bigger than it probably was. But now he paused. He asked questions. He started contributing automatically to savings every month. He paid down his remaining credit cards. And most importantly, when something went wrong, he stopped calling me before trying to solve it himself. Our relationship changed because of that. Our conversations became lighter. When my phone showed Ryan's name, my first thought was no longer, "How much?" Sometimes he called because Sophie had done something funny. Sometimes because he wanted my recipe for David's chili. Once he called simply because he had driven past a hardware store playing a song David loved. "I heard it and thought of Dad," he said. We stayed on the phone for 20 minutes. No crisis, no request. Just my son talking to his mother. I had not realized how much I missed that. Claire built a quieter life too. She rented her townhouse for the first year, rather than rushing to buy another property. She and I remained close, but we kept the boundary we had established. We did not build our relationship around Ryan's mistakes. When Sophie was with me, Claire was always welcome. When Sophie was with Ryan, I respected his time. We became something that did not have a perfect label. Family after divorce, perhaps. Imperfect, but still family. I also made changes. Margaret helped me revise my estate plan. That conversation was harder than I expected. "I don't want this to feel punitive," I told her. "Then don't design it as punishment." I created a trust for Sophie. It would help with education and later important milestones in her adult life. Not unlimited access. Not money she could treat as inevitable. Support with structure. Ryan would still inherit from me, but not in a way that allowed him to build today's financial decisions around tomorrow's inheritance. When I told him I expected at least a little resistance. Instead, he nodded. "That makes sense. You're not upset." He smiled. "I'm trying not to plan around you dying anymore." I laughed. Excellent policy. Then his expression became serious. "Mom, I'm sorry you ever had to say that to me." I reached across the table. "I know. That was enough." The following spring, the three of us attended Sophie's school concert. Claire sat on one side of me. Ryan sat on the other. For 90 minutes we watched Sophie play clarinet badly and enthusiastically. Afterward, she insisted we all go to dinner. We chose a neighborhood Italian restaurant David had loved. Halfway through the meal, Sophie told a story that made Ryan laugh so hard he nearly spilled his water. Claire laughed too. For one brief moment, I could almost see the family we had once been, but I didn't wish for it back. That surprised me. Some things are meant to be repaired. Others are meant to end honestly, so something healthier can take their place. When dinner finished, the server placed the check in the center of the table. For 13 years, that small moment had followed a familiar pattern. Ryan would glance at me, sometimes joking, sometimes not. "Mom's got it." Or, "You're the retired rich lady." Or simply that quick look that asked the question without requiring him to say it. That night he did it again. His eyes moved toward me. Habit. Then he stopped. I saw recognition cross his face. He reached into his pocket. "I've got mine, Mom." 4 words. Nothing dramatic, no music, no speech. But my eyes immediately filled. Ryan noticed. "Oh, come on." I laughed. "I'm not crying. You absolutely are." Sophie looked between us. "Why is Grandma crying about a restaurant bill?" Claire smiled. "It's a long story." Ryan pulled out his card. "A very long story." I wiped my eyes. "You don't have to pay for everyone." "I know." He looked at me. "I'm paying for mine." That was the point. Not repayment. Not punishment. Responsibility. He wasn't trying to prove he no longer needed anyone. We all need people. He was proving he finally understood that love and financial rescue were not the same thing. On the drive home, I thought about the blue box. It was still in David's study. The original receipts remained exactly where he had placed them. I had considered throwing them away. I never did. They no longer made me angry. They reminded me how complicated love can become when generosity loses its boundaries. David and I had wanted to give Ryan every advantage. A beautiful wedding, a safe home, opportunities for Sophie, relief during hard times. None of those choices had been wrong by themselves. Our mistake was believing that because we could remove a consequence, we always should. Eventually, Ryan stopped seeing rescue as extraordinary. And I stopped seeing how much of my identity had become tied to providing it. His divorce broke that pattern. Not the way I would have chosen. Not without pain. But it broke it. I did not save Ryan's marriage. That was never mine to save. I did not save his house. I did not save his lifestyle. And I did not save him from discovering that some decisions have costs no loving parent should erase. But something survived. Our relationship. His relationship with Sophie. My relationship with Claire. And slowly Ryan's relationship with himself. When I reached home that evening, I went into David's study. I opened the blue box and found the handwritten ledger. At the bottom was his old sentence. "Helping him stand is love. Paying every time he refuses to stand may become something else." I ran my finger over his handwriting. "You were right," I whispered. Then I thought about Ryan reaching for his own wallet. For the first time, I added something beneath David's words. Not another amount. Just one sentence. "He's standing now." I closed the box. And this time I didn't feel like I was preserving evidence. I felt like I was closing a chapter. Ketuk Fan 15. There is a difficult truth about loving our children after they become adults. Sometimes the thing that makes us feel most loving is not the thing that helps them most. For years, I believed being a good mother meant making Ryan's burdens lighter whenever I could. David and I had worked hard. We had savings. We could afford to help. So when our son struggled, I told myself there was no reason to let him suffer unnecessarily. But there is a difference between suffering and consequences. There is a difference between helping someone through circumstances they could not control and repeatedly protecting them from choices they refused to change. I had to learn that difference at 68. The receipt taught me something else too. They were never proof that Ryan owed me $180,000. Love is not an invoice. You cannot raise a child, count every sacrifice, and present the total when they disappoint you. That was never what I wanted. Those receipts showed me a pattern. They showed me how often fear had disguised itself as generosity. I feared Ryan would struggle. I feared he would resent me. I feared saying no might cost me my relationship with him. And when he threatened my relationship with Sophie, I discovered the deepest fear of all, that perhaps people loved me because of what I provided. They didn't. Sophie still came over. Claire still treated me like family. And eventually Ryan came back too. Boundaries did not destroy my family. They changed the way we loved one another. Sometimes love means opening your door. Sometimes it means opening your wallet. And sometimes love means keeping your wallet closed while saying, I'm still here, but this problem belongs to you. If you were in my place, would you have given Ryan the $85,000? Or would you have sent him the receipts too? Tell me honestly in the comments. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if this story reminded you of someone you love, or of a boundary you once had to find the courage to set. Please like the video and subscribe for more stories about family dignity, consequences, forgiveness, and finding the strength to love without losing yourself. There are moments in life when loving someone means doing more than opening your heart. It means having the courage to close your wallet, set a boundary, and let that person face what belongs to them. Paige spent years believing that helping her son was simply what a mother did. She paid bills, rescued him from financial mistakes, supported his family, and quietly sacrificed because she never wanted to see her child struggle. But over time, her kindness became something Ryan expected rather than appreciated. He stopped seeing her help as a gift and began seeing it as a safety net he could always depend on. The greatest lesson in Paige's story is that boundaries are not the opposite of love. Sometimes boundaries are the deepest form of love we can offer. When we constantly protect someone from the consequences of their choices, we may be protecting them from the very lessons they need to grow. Paige's decision not to give Ryan $85,000 was not revenge. She wasn't trying to punish her son or make him suffer. She simply refused to keep paying for problems she did not create. By sending him the receipts instead of the money, she forced him to confront a truth he had avoided for years. His life could no longer be built around someone else's rescue. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that saying no did not destroy their relationship. It gave Ryan the opportunity to become responsible. It gave Paige the freedom to love her son without being financially responsible for him. And it taught both of them that forgiveness does not require forgetting, and love does not require surrendering your dignity. Sometimes the strongest thing a mother can say is, I love you too much to keep doing this for you. If Paige's story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you have given Ryan the $85,000, or would you have done what Paige did and let him face the consequences? Share your honest opinion in the comments. And if this story reminded you of someone in your own family, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. More emotional family stories, powerful twists, and real